Barry Markowitz was visiting LA and staying with his beloved Reiner family.
Nick was there, and he looked great. It's like I'm so broken, I'm so freaked out, like everyone, and that this happened.
In December 2025, Rob Reiner's final words about his own son sent shockwaves through Hollywood. "I'm petrified of my son." Less than 24 hours after speaking those words, Rob and his wife were found stabbed to death in their bedroom. Now, at 77, one of Rob Reiner's closest friends has finally spoken out.
He was just he's such a freaking great person. It's hard for me to even comprehend this stuff, but mental illness is a terrible thing.
Revealing what really pushed his son to the edge and why everything ended the way it did. The birth of a legendary friendship. Rob Reiner's life was filled with famous faces, but only a few friendships truly shaped him. Among them, none mattered more than his bond with Billy Crystal and longtime producer Barry Markowitz. These were not Hollywood friendships built on convenience. They were built on trust, loyalty, and decades of shared history. Rob met Billy Crystal in the mid-1970s on the set of All in the Family. Billy was young, nervous, and trying to find his place. Rob, already a star, treated him like an equal. That moment began a friendship that lasted more than 45 years. They supported each other through career highs and personal lows. Billy often said Rob wasn't just a collaborator, he was family. They laughed together, argued honestly, and leaned on each other when fame felt heavy. Billy later described Rob as the person who understood him without explanation. Barry Markowitz played a quieter but equally important role. As a producer and behind-the-scenes partner, Barry was Rob's stabilizer. He helped turn Rob's creative chaos into finished projects. When Rob doubted himself, Barry grounded him. When pressure from studios grew intense, Barry was the one reminding Rob why he started making films in the first place. Their partnership was built on mutual respect rather than ego. Together, Rob, Billy, and Barry formed a small inner circle that stayed intact even as Hollywood changed around them. They avoided gossip, protected each other's privacy, and kept their conversations real. While many relationships in the industry faded, theirs only grew stronger with time. Friends close to them say Rob trusted Billy with his emotions and Barry with his decisions. That balance kept him steady for years, which is why, when everything finally fell apart, it shocked those who knew him best. The man who always had his friends beside him was suddenly facing something none of them could fix. Behind the laughter and accolades, a darkness was quietly taking root within the Reiner family, one that would eventually shatter everything Rob had built. The son they never gave up on. Rob Reiner married Michelle Singer in 1989, the same year when Harry Met Sally was released. It was a partnership that would last 36 years.
I meet the woman who I've now been married to for 36 years, Michelle, and we fall in love during the making of the movie.
Together, they raised a family. Together, they built a life filled with love and purpose. Their youngest son, Nick Reiner, was born into Hollywood royalty. His grandfather was the legendary Carl Reiner. His father was one of the most successful directors in the industry. The expectations that came with the Reiner name were enormous. Growing up in that shadow could not have been easy. How do you find your own identity when your family has already achieved so much? How do you carve out your own path when every step you take is compared to giants? At some point, Nick began to struggle. The details of when and how remain private, but what became public was his battle with substance addiction. Over the years, this battle played out in ways that the family could not hide from the world. But here is what everyone who knew the Reiners will tell you. Rob and Michelle never gave up on their son. Never, not once. Cinematographer Barry Markowitz was one of Rob's closest friends. He worked with Rob on films and knew the family intimately. In the days after the tragedy, Barry spoke about what he had witnessed over the years. They tried a million things with him, Barry said, not giving him money, but sending him to the top-of-the-line places. Rob never gave up. He tried everything. This is important to understand. Rob and Michelle did not enable Nick's addiction by giving him cash. That would have only made things worse. Instead, they invested in his recovery. They sent him to the best rehabilitation facilities money could buy. They surrounded him with professionals who could help. And through it all, they never stopped loving him. They never pushed him away. they never gave up hope that their son could get better. "If you knew Rob," Barry said, "he was just a bundle of love." In November 2025, just weeks before the tragedy, Barry Markowitz had an opportunity to see the Reiner family up close. He was in Los Angeles for the premiere of his latest film, The Perfect Gamble, starring David Arquette. Rob and Michelle invited him to stay at their home. Barry stayed with the family for 5 days. What he saw during that visit would later haunt him, because it seemed to contradict everything that was about to happen. "I may have been one of the last people to see them," Barry recalled. He remembered seeing Nick, who was 32 years old at the time. "He looked great," Barry said. Nick was sitting and talking with the family. They ate dinner together, old-school style, gathered around the table. Barry saw a family that was connected, present, engaged with one another. "A lot of love," Barry remembered, "and always a lot of love." During his stay, Barry watched Nick go about his days. Nick went out to play tennis. He played basketball. He took out the garbage. He washed dishes. He watched television with the family in the evenings. Barry never felt unsafe. He never sensed any danger. Nick was present and participating in family life in what seemed like healthy, normal ways. "Love is the only thing I saw," Barry said, spelling out the word for emphasis. "And I don't think it was fake. They had a real bond. This is what makes everything so confusing. This is what keeps Barry and others awake at night." "I think what's puzzling the most," Barry said, "the 360, is that there was so much love, and it doesn't jive. I'm not here to judge anyone. How could a family filled with so much love meet such a violent end? How could the son who washed dishes and played basketball become the person prosecutors now accuse of murder?" Barry saw love and normalcy during his November visit. But something was about to change dramatically in the weeks that followed. Something was building inside Nick that even those closest to him could not see. And it would all come crashing down at a Christmas party that should have been a celebration. The Christmas party that changed everything. It was December 13th, 2025, a Saturday evening. Hollywood's elite gathered at the home of Conan O'Brien for his annual Christmas party. This was one of the most exclusive invitations of the holiday season. The guest list read like a who's who of entertainment. Rob and Michelle Reiner attended the party. They brought their son Nick with them. For a family that had fought so hard to keep Nick connected, to keep him part of their world, this seemed like a positive step. He was joining them at a social event. He was being included. But what happened at that party would alarm everyone who witnessed it. According to sources who spoke to the New York Post, tensions between Rob, Michelle, and Nick escalated dramatically during the evening. The family became involved in a heated verbal altercation that drew attention from other guests. A lifelong friend of the family later revealed what they had witnessed. They had an argument at Conan's holiday party, the friend said, and Rob had been telling people they were scared for Nick, and scared that his mental state was deteriorating. This was not the Nick that Barry Markowitz had seen just weeks earlier. Something had shifted. Something had changed. Multiple outlets reported that Nick's behavior at the party set off alarm bells throughout the room. Guest after guest noticed that something was deeply wrong. According to People magazine, Nick was freaking everyone out, acting crazy, kept asking people if they were famous. Think about that for a moment. This was a Hollywood Christmas party. Of course, people there were famous, but Nick seemed disconnected from reality, unable to recognize the world around him, obsessed with a question that made no sense in that context. US Weekly described his conduct throughout the event as creepy. That word would be used again and again by people who were there that night. There was something off about Nick, something unsettling, something that made people uncomfortable. One insider used the phrase freaking out to describe Nick's state. He was not just behaving strangely, he was exhibiting behavior that genuinely frightened the people around him. And then there was the argument with his parents, the heated confrontation that played out in front of other guests. Whatever was said between Rob, Michelle, and Nick that night, it was serious enough that people remembered it. It was intense enough that it became part of the story told in the days that followed. For Rob Reiner, this party was one of the last public gatherings he would ever attend. And at this party, he reportedly made a confession that would later haunt everyone who heard it. Rob had been telling people at the party that he was scared, not just worried, not just concerned, scared. He was scared for Nick, watching his son's mental state deteriorate before his eyes, but he was also scared of something else. He was scared of what Nick might do. The party ended. The guests went home. Rob and Michelle returned to their Brentwood mansion with their son. Whatever happened in those final hours, whatever was said or done after they left Conan O'Brien's house, it would set in motion a tragedy that would shock the nation. Less than 24 hours later, Rob and Michelle Reiner would be dead. But behind the laughter and accolades, a darkness was quietly taking root within the Reiner family, one that would eventually shatter everything Rob had built. The words that haunt Hollywood. In the days after Rob and Michelle Reiner were killed, their closest friends gathered for a memorial service. The location was the Los Angeles home of comedian Albert Brooks, himself a legend in the comedy world. The guest list at that memorial read like a tribute to decades of Hollywood history. Billy Crystal attended with his wife Janice. Larry David was there, the brilliant mind behind Seinfeld and Curb Your Enthusiasm. Bill Hader came to pay his respects, and Conan O'Brien attended as well, the very host of the Christmas party, where everything had begun to unravel. It was at this memorial service that Rob Reiner's final words about his son became public, and those words were chilling. According to a source who was present at the service, one A-list attendee stood up and revealed what Rob had allegedly said at Conan O'Brien's Christmas party. The revelation stunned the room. Rob Reiner's last known words about his son were these: "I'm petrified of my son. Petrified. Not worried, not concerned. Petrified." This was a father expressing genuine terror about his own child. In the days before he was killed, Rob had reportedly confided to friends that he feared Nick could hurt him. These were not the vague worries of an anxious parent. These were the desperate warnings of a father who sensed something catastrophic was coming. When these words were revealed at the memorial service, many people in the room broke down in tears. The weight of what Rob had been carrying in his final days suddenly became real. He had known. He had sensed the danger, and he had been powerless to stop it. The contrast between what Barry Markowitz witnessed in November and what guests saw at the Christmas party in December is stark. Just weeks earlier, Nick was washing dishes and playing tennis. He was eating dinner with the family. He seemed present and connected. But by December 13th, something had changed dramatically. Rob was telling people that Nick's mental state was deteriorating. He was expressing fear not just for his son, but fear of his son. What happened in those few weeks? What triggered such a rapid decline? These questions may never be fully answered. But what we know is that Rob Reiner spent his final days living with a terrible knowledge. He knew something was wrong. He knew his son was slipping away. And he was afraid of what might happen next. The family returned home after the Christmas party. Nick was with them. Whatever conversations happened that night, whatever arguments continued from the party, they happened behind closed doors. Sometime between Saturday night, December 13th, and Sunday afternoon, December 14th, 2025, the unthinkable happened. Rob Reiner, 78 years old, and his wife Michelle Singer Reiner, 70 years old, were stabbed to death inside their Brentwood home. The man who had given the world so much laughter died in violence. The father who had never given up on his son was allegedly killed by that same son. The love story that had lasted 36 years ended in a bedroom soaked with blood. And it was their daughter who would discover what had happened. Then, what investigators discovered inside the master bedroom revealed a brutality that would shock even the most hardened detectives. The horrific discovery. Romy Reiner had always been close to her father. Just a day before the tragedy, she had shared pictures of him on social media. Looking at those photos, you could see the love between them. She was clearly a daddy's girl, and their bond was evident to anyone who saw them together. On Sunday afternoon, December 14th, 2025, Romy arrived at her parents' Brentwood home. What she found there would change her life forever. Her parents were in their bedroom. They were not sleeping. They were dead. And they had been dead for hours. According to police, the bodies of Rob and Michelle Reiner were already showing signs of rigor mortis when they were discovered. This meant they had been killed sometime between Saturday night and Sunday afternoon. For all those hours, they had lain there while the world went on without them. The nature of the attack was brutal beyond words. According to sources who spoke to the Daily Mail, The injuries were particularly savage. Both Rob and Michelle Reiner had their throats cut. Investigators believe it is possible that they were asleep in their bed when the attack occurred. They may have been killed in their most vulnerable state, unaware that death was coming. They may have had no chance to fight back, no chance to call for help, no chance to say goodbye. On December 18, 2025, the Los Angeles County Medical Examiner confirmed the cause of death for both victims.
Into the murders of legendary actor, producer, and director Rob Reiner and his wife, Michelle.
Rob and Michelle Reiner died from multiple sharp force injuries. The manner of death was officially ruled a homicide. When Romy made the terrible discovery, she knew immediately who to call. She reached for her phone and dialed Billy Crystal. Billy Crystal, the man who had been Rob's best friend for 45 years. The man who had clutched Rob's hand at the When Harry Met Sally premiere. The man who had played baseball with Rob, complained on the phone with Rob, shared decades of laughter and life with Rob. That call from Romy must have shattered Billy's world. His best friend was gone, and not just gone, murdered. Billy Crystal rushed to the Brentwood mansion. By the time he arrived, police were already swarming the property. The house that had been filled with love and laughter was now a crime scene. Photographers captured Billy as he left the house. The 77-year-old comedian was visibly devastated. He was photographed wiping tears from his face, his grief too overwhelming to hide. Think about the contrast. The last time Billy had been this emotionally overwhelmed at something involving Rob, it was holding hands at a movie premiere, laughing with joy at the magic they had created together. Now he was standing outside a mansion, surrounded by police tape, crying for a friend he would never see again. But Romy had more to tell investigators than just the discovery of her parents' bodies. She had something else to say, something damning. When police asked about potential suspects, Romy did not hesitate. She told investigators that her brother Nick should be a suspect. She described him in one word: dangerous. This was a sister who had watched her parents pour endless love and resources into saving her brother. This was someone who had seen the family dinners, the rehabilitation attempts, the unwavering hope that Nick could get better. And now she was telling police that her own brother was dangerous, that he should be investigated for the murder of their parents, the Christmas party, Nick's disturbing behavior, the argument with their parents, Rob's confession that he was petrified of his son. All of it now cast a long, dark shadow over everything. As Nick Reiner was taken into custody later that evening, the legal machinery began to turn, and the charges filed against him would carry consequences from which there could be no return. The arrest and the charges. On the evening of December 14, 2025, police made an announcement that confirmed everyone's worst fears. "We're able to take into custody Nick Reiner, a suspect in this case," they said. He was subsequently booked for murder. The 32-year-old son, who had been washing dishes and playing tennis just weeks earlier, was now in handcuffs. The young man who had eaten dinner with his family, old school, was now sitting in a police holding cell. The child that Rob and Michelle had never given up on was now accused of taking their lives. Prosecutors alleged that Nick Reiner fatally stabbed his parents in the early morning hours of December 14, 2025. After killing them, he allegedly fled the scene. He was arrested later that evening. The charges filed against Nick are among the most serious in the criminal justice system. He faces 2 counts of first-degree murder, 1 for each parent. The Los Angeles County District Attorney confirmed that Nick allegedly used a knife to commit the killings.
Mr. Reiner, you have a constitutional and statutory right to a speedy arraignment. Your counsel is requesting that your arraignment be continued to January 7, 2026.
These charges carry the most severe possible penalties. If convicted, Nick faces either life in prison without the possibility of parole or the death penalty. District Attorney Nathan Hochman has stated that no decision has been made yet on whether prosecutors will seek capital punishment.
These charges will be 2 counts of first-degree murder with the special circumstance of multiple murders.
Nick Reiner made his first court appearance on December 18, 2025. It was a brief hearing focused mainly on procedural matters, but what was said in that courtroom gave a hint of the complexity that lies ahead. Nick's defense attorney, Alan Jackson, asked for a continuance of the arraignment. "Your Honor, if we could, I would like to ask for a continuance of the arraignment," he said. "It's too early." The judge granted the request. Nick waived his right to a speedy arraignment, and a new court date was set for January 7th, 2026. After the hearing, Nick's lawyer spoke to the press. His words were carefully chosen. "First of all, and most importantly, this is a devastating tragedy that has befallen the Reiner family," he said. "We all recognize that. Our hearts go out to the entire Reiner family." He continued, "There are very, very complex and serious issues that are associated with this case. These need to be thoroughly, but very carefully dealt with and examined and looked at and analyzed." The lawyer asked for restraint and dignity. He urged people to avoid a rush to judgment and jumping to conclusions. He emphasized that the legal system should be allowed to move forward the way it was designed to move forward. What are the complex and serious issues the defense is hinting at? Mental health? Nick's history of addiction? Something else entirely? These questions remain unanswered for now. What we do know is that Nick Reiner is being held under extraordinary conditions. He remains in custody without the option for bail. He is being kept on self-harm watch in administrative segregation at the Twin Towers Correctional Facility in Los Angeles. This is a facility designed for inmates who require the highest levels of observation and security. Nick is being watched around the clock. Every precaution is being taken to ensure he does not harm himself. The defense attorney also revealed that Nick had not been medically cleared to be transferred from jail to the courthouse for his arraignment. No details were provided about his condition. This left a somber question mark hanging over his well-being. As Hollywood mourned one of its greatest directors, those closest to Rob Reiner gathered to pay tribute, and their words would paint a picture of a man whose light made the darkness of his death all the more incomprehensible. The legacy and the void. In the days following the tragedy, Hollywood's greatest comedy minds gathered to pay tribute to their fallen friend. Billy Crystal, Albert Brooks, Larry David, Martin Short, and director Barry Levinson came together to issue a joint statement. These were not just colleagues. These were men who had known Rob Reiner for decades. Men who had laughed with him, worked with him, loved him. Their statement was powerful and heartfelt. They remembered Rob not just as a masterful filmmaker, but as a devoted husband and a force for good. He charmed audiences, and they trusted him, they said. And it was true. Every time Rob Reiner's name appeared on a movie, audiences knew they were in good hands. They knew they would laugh, or cry, or be thrilled. They knew they would feel something real. The tribute highlighted Rob's extraordinary range as a filmmaker. He moved effortlessly from comedy to drama, from mockumentary to documentary, always at the top of his game. He was one of those rare artists who could do anything and do it brilliantly. But beyond the professional achievements, his friends emphasized something more personal. His greatest gift was freedom, they said. If you had an idea, he listened. This was Rob Reiner's secret. He did not just command, he collaborated. He created an environment where everyone around him could do their best work. He elevated the people he worked with. He made them better. The statement also paid tribute to Michelle Reiner, the woman who had been Rob's partner for 36 years. Together, they were described as a special force together, dynamic, unselfish, and inspiring. Beyond his work in entertainment, Rob was remembered as a passionate and brave citizen committed to improving the country he loved. This was a mission he shared with Michelle. They were not just Hollywood royalty. They were people who cared deeply about making the world better. In closing their tribute, Rob's friends borrowed a line from one of his favorite films, It's a Wonderful Life. The quote could not have been more fitting. Each man's life touches so many other lives, and when he isn't around, he leaves an awful hole. For Billy Crystal, that hole is deeply personal. 45 years of friendship, 45 years of phone calls and baseball games and movie premieres, 45 years of being best friends, just as Norman Lear had intended when he cast them together on All in the Family. All of that ended in one night of violence. All of those memories now exist only in the past. Billy Crystal will never have another phone call with his best friend. He will never clutch Rob's hand. at another movie premiere. The friendship that defined both their lives is over. Larry David was photographed outside the Reiner home in the days after the murder. The comedy titan behind Seinfeld and Curb Your Enthusiasm came to pay his respects. His presence was a quiet testament to the profound connections Rob had forged within the world of entertainment. Rob and Larry had collaborated memorably on a 2001 episode of Curb Your Enthusiasm called The Thong, where Rob played a fictionalized version of himself. The contrast between the creative joy of that collaboration and the grim reality of Larry standing outside a crime scene could not have been more stark. As the legal process moves forward toward Nick Reiner's January 7, 2026 arraignment, the questions only multiply. What happened in those final hours? What pushed a son who had been washing dishes and watching TV with his parents to allegedly commit such a savage act? How does a family filled with so much love arrive at such a violent end? Barry Markowitz's words continue to echo. There was so much love, and it doesn't jive. Perhaps the answers will emerge at trial. Perhaps we will learn about Nick's mental state, about what triggered his alleged actions, about the darkness that consumed him. Or perhaps some questions will never be fully answered. What we know for certain is this: Rob Reiner gave the world immeasurable joy. He made us laugh. He made us cry. He made us believe in fairy tales and courtroom heroes and the possibility that men and women really can be friends. He created art that will outlive us all. And he loved his son. Through addiction, through recovery attempts, through everything, Rob Reiner never gave up on Nick. Neither did Michelle. Tamel. They loved him until the very end. They loved him even when, according to Rob's own chilling words, they were petrified of him. That is perhaps the most heartbreaking part of this story. Not just the violence, not just the loss, but the fact that two parents who loved their son unconditionally may have been killed by that same son. The story of the Reiner family was once a tale of love, creativity, and second chances. It was a story about never giving up, about fighting for the people you love, about believing that things can get better. Now it stands as a haunting reminder. Even in the homes of the most beloved among us, darkness can take root. It can grow silently, invisibly, and sometimes, despite all the love in the world, it consumes everything in its path. Rob Reiner touched millions of lives through his art. He touched countless more through his friendship, his activism, his boundless generosity of spirit. And now he is gone. And for those who knew him best, for Billy Crystal and his other friends who gathered to mourn him, that hole will never be filled. Rest in peace, Rob Reiner. Rest in peace, Michelle. Your love story ended in tragedy, but your legacy, the laughter, the joy, the magic you created together, that will live forever. What are your thoughts on Rob's tragic death? Share in the comments.